everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 6 of ORB on the Movements of the Earth, and Oczy has met Badeni, and I'm ready to learn about him. Our blonde, demoted monk. I'm so ready to find out more about his character. Gross is dead. People just drop like flies in this series. You can't get to like them. It's going to be amazing to see if like Oczy lives a long time because he's this innocent, gullible being and he has to go on a journey of self-discovery, or if the extremes are the ones that live. You have Oczy, who's super innocent, and Nowak, who's kind of like corrupted himself in ways. It'd be interesting to see. So as my dog's asking me to throw his toy for him, I do have quite a few comments I want to dive into. So we're not going to waste any more time. We're just going to jump back to the comments. These are mostly from episode 2 and episode 3, because I am watching a little bit ahead, because can you blame me? Episode 5, though, I did want to make a comment. After I went back and rewatched the episode, in episode 5, Nowak did not see Oczy without his mask on during the dark duel that they had, so he would not immediately recognize him in the streets, especially considering how dark it was the night they escaped. Maybe that was why they made it so dark, to be the alibi, being like, look how dark on the screen it was. You could barely tell who was there. So that is something to keep in mind, that if Oczy and Badeni get seen by Nowak in the streets, Oczy may recognize Nowak. Nowak's not going to know who Oczy is. And he's not going to be wearing a hood on patrol anymore, so that is something to keep in mind. So I thought that was interesting. Moomin Comet, for episode 3, they said you cannot kill an idea. And I was like, I love it. Ideas are infectious and you cannot kill them. Someone will carry the torch, which is, kind of the theory behind this series in a way. They did talk about in episode 2, though. They left a longer comment for episode 2 that I wanted to touch base on. The scientific process is not there to prove an idea right. It's to prove it wrong. Through trying to disprove a finding, we move closer to the truth of it. Sometimes we prove what we thought was a truth to be wrong. We move closer to the truth. I know this drives people crazy because they want concrete, non-changing answers that they can hang their hat on as a truth. I think that's why we have so much backlash against science currently. It comes down to a lack of education and also the vastness of our knowledge. It's impossible to understand it all. I can relate to that because I told them in the comment that I often compare it to poetry. Whenever I teach one of my English classes, we have a section on poetry, and people either love it, are all about it, or they hate it. And I'm always like, why do you hate poetry? And they're like, because I don't understand it, because there's not a concrete meaning. You can't know, like in books, sometimes, not always, but in a lot of books, there is a concrete theme, or there is a theme that is easily recognizable, and there are character motivations, there are things you can pick apart quite easily, and you can discuss them. With poetry, sometimes it's so abstract, you just don't even know where to begin. Maybe the poet didn't even have a point. Maybe they're just putting shit down. So poetry is difficult, but I feel like poetry is often the science of literature because it's literature at its best. It gets to the truth of matters, to emotionality, to the core and soul of a writer. And it does so in ways that are often more organic and natural than sitting down and crafting a story. So I don't know, but a lot of people don't like poetry because of that exact same reason. Movement also says sometimes religion, and I'm talking about all religions, not just Christianity, puts God in a box. The audacity of humanity to cage a God with religious scripture. If God is truly a God, why not the heliocentric model as opposed to the geocentric model? Silly humans. We love to make deities conform to our rules. Oh, Moomin, that line is so good. That got me just like right in the core of me. We love to make deities conform to our rules. Oh my gosh. I love it. I freaking love it. But yes, that's exactly right. Like, I think Hubert touches on it way back in episode 2 so well, being like, the world is beautiful because God made it beautiful. Why limit it? Why say? And the reality is because it's a construct. It's a man-made construct that they're using a religious deity to help purport their own way of thinking and their own agendas. And it's kind of crazy. So I feel my personal take is you can be religious, spiritual, and believe in God or deity or whatever, but you don't necessarily have to. You also have to come with it with the understanding of what backs up that religion. So it's fascinating. God, I love that line. I love that line. Anyway, so Geen for episode 3 says, fun fact. All of the surnames of the characters in this series are legit Polish surnames. Their pronunciation is a little wonky, but mostly correct, which is very impressive to me as a Polish person. So Geen is one of the moderators of this series, and them being Polish is crazy awesome. Love that. Makes me feel a bit pressured because I'm like, oh no. And at least they didn't try to include. Now, Geen included this name. At least they didn't try to include names like, and then they include this name, which we're going to take a stab at here in a second, which is a real Polish surname, by the way, in the series, and completely butcher them. This surname that they listed is mostly Z's. Mostly Z's and consonants. Not a lot of vowels. I'm going to try to say it, and then I've put it over here onto the little translate search engine in Polish to see what we get. So my translation is this is going to sound really bad. Kierzeko Brzegoskizinski. Now let's hear what they say here.
Krzekobrzegoszczyński. Krzekobrzegoszczyński.
That sounds like I'm waking up drunk.
Krzekobrzegoszczyński.
Nope. So, and if you're wondering what it means
Krekobrzeg County.
Krekobrzeg County. That lady says it how I would. Krekobrzeg County.
Krzekobrzegoszczyński.
The way they do their Z's, the way that translate does the Z sounds, it's wild. Yep, glad we don't have those names. And while we're talking about names, the way they spell Rafal's name in the subtitles is wrong. Probably because it's a letter that's almost only in the Polish alphabet, and they didn't bother typing it every time. The correct way to spell it is, they have Rafal, but the L looks like a special character that looks like a little almost italic T or an uppercase L with like a little T line through it, which is pronounced the way as in W, as in wait. So is it Rafay? What? We're gonna go back to that. Now I'm curious. All right. Rafal, like Raphael? Rafal. Well, the way that they say it in here is the N sound. It's Rafay, which would be Raphael. Okay, interesting. I'm gonna keep saying Raffle. I hope that's okay. Also, fun fact: with my limited knowledge of Japanese, I find it both funny and fascinating. The word Raffle is used to describe what people like Nowak fear. Is chisei, which can mean truth, but also intelligence and wisdom. I think that's a funny coincidence. Earth can be translated as chi, so there is earth in truth and intelligence. The world of language is such a fun place. I absolutely love it. But yeah, I'm glad I don't have to pronounce that one name. Come on, ORB, don't give us crazy names. So... But thank you all so much for the comments and the kind words. This has been so much fun. I'm really excited to see what this series is going to give us moving into episode 6. Is Oczy going to die in the pattern of the rule of 3? I don't know. Gross has died, so maybe that disrupts the cycle a little bit. Maybe Oczy will live longer than 3 episodes like Rafal. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But in any case, we are going to start episode 6 of ORB on the movements of the earth. Thank you all so much for your comments and kind words. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. We're going to play everyone's favorite game of how long will Romania go before she needs Whiteboard Coon? But we may get through this episode without needing Whiteboard Coon. We may let him have a break this week because most of this episode was setting up Badeni's backstory, which I had ideas of what I thought about Badeni and why he had you want to know how I got these scars? Like, I had ideas about what that would be. This exceeded every expectation in the best way. How does this series do this? How does this series make these characters that are so good? Like, they're just so well done characterization wise. Like, if you've watched my channel for more than one show, you've probably heard me talk about how there are 7 elements of fiction. I teach them in my English classes. There are 7 elements of fiction. Lots of people like different elements for different reasons. Some are their favorites. My favorite element in fiction are characters. I am a character-driven person when I look at series. It may not have the most engaging plot. It may not have the most unique style, but if it's got engaging characterization and characters in it, damn it, I am locked in. And this series is really good with its characters. Also, apologies for my crazy dog that has demanded I throw his sex toy-like object throughout this reaction. My friends make fun of that object. They're like, you do know what that looks like. I'm like, yes, but that is the only thing he likes. So that's where we're at. Anyway, so let's talk about this. He's probably going to lay down now that the episode's over and just be like, take that, winch. So let's talk about this episode. I've got a couple things that I do want to note from the Discord that were brought up with episode 4 that now are worthy of being brought up again. So that's exciting. But man, Akshi, I'm so damn glad that Badeni went with Akshi to find Raffle and Hubert's and all of the paperwork, because for a hot second, I thought he wasn't going to go. And I was like, Akshi, you've got to sell this. Why aren't you selling this? But marketing skills is not something Akshi has, and that is okay. I am fascinated to see how their characters move forward from here. Because Badeni we're going to talk about his character and all the things he represents. But Akshi is very much just like, I'm just doing this but Akshi's taken a step. He's looked up at the night sky. By the end of this episode, it was so satisfying. And he's starting to think for himself. And I honestly, if something happens to Badeni, I could see Akshi carrying on from Badeni and carrying on his work. The only problem is that Akshi can't read and write. So he can't really do the calculations, but he could do like what Gross said and find somebody that does. Now, if Nowak's daughter is the one with the blonde hair and she gets involved in all of this and Nowak's daughter is convicted of heresy, oh, that could get interesting. But I'm putting the cart before the horse on that one, because this girl may not even be Nowak's daughter, but she looks an awful lot like him. You know, anime logic there. So Badeni and Akshi meet. And he's like, hey, I got some documents I want you to check out. And then what's interesting is that Badeni stops him and doesn't want him to come any closer because he thinks he might be a mercenary. Again, I feel like they are setting up Nowak and Badeni possibly having a confrontation. I would be curious to see if Nowak thinks of Badeni as similar to Raffle a little bit. Maybe. They're very different, but I feel like there could be some similarities there that Nowak would pick up on. And then he's like, I'm a clergyman, maintain your distance. That's insane to me, because Damien is all up in Nowak's business. They're working hand in hand, and Nowak is, well, he's ex-mercenary, but he's got blood on him all the time. So I find that interesting. Also, I'm curious if that's mainly just because Badeni doesn't want to get attacked, but then you look at his backstory, and the moment he said he didn't want Akshi coming closer because he's a mercenary, I thought, oh, well, all of his scars and stuff are from a mercenary attacking him, and he has like post-traumatic stress and doesn't want him there. No, the wounds he has on him are by his own inflicted voluntary wounds, with the exception of his eyes, which were caused by him in the long run. So yeah, that's crazy. We're going to talk about that. But that's so interesting. And he's like, I want to confirm something. Will those documents dramatically change my life? This man has an adrenaline issue. Badeni has a thrill addiction. He is high on adrenaline and seeking out the thrills. And if it's not going to change his life, if it's not going to cause him to have an earth-shattering out-of-body experience, I ain't bothering. And it's like, oh my God, this man is addicted to adrenaline. So he's like, if you can't promise that, you're not worth my time. It's interesting. Okay. Well, he's like, in a certain sense, it might be life-changing. Just Akshi. Damn, Akshi is like, he's a freaking little teddy bear over there. He's like, it might change your life. I don't know. God. I love Akshi, but at the same time, I have no clue what the series is going to do with him because he's just so innocent. He's like, well, they could anger the church. And then Badeni's like, okay, let's see it. Insane. So he gives him the documents. I felt bad for Gross in this whole opening scene. I felt bad for him at the beginning because he was kind of like, when Akshi gave him the book and everything, and then Badeni's like, well, who sent you here? Who told you to come here? He's like, oh, someone I knew. He doesn't mention that they're dead, which I get why he doesn't say that, but it kind of felt like, man, F Gross's drag, because Badeni's like, what are these pedestrian writings? And I'm like, oh, Gross spent a lot of time on those, damn it, you know? Which is part of Badeni's character, is that he is arrogant. He is very much thinks he is better than other people. And that is so fascinating to me. He has such an ego to him, but he's also fascinating and really intriguing and he's not mean, but there is an arrogance and an ego there. He's not mean-spirited necessarily. He just definitely if he had glasses on, he would be pushing them up and thinking he's better than you. He gives kind of a Midorama vibe from Kuroko's Basketball. A little bit. Midorama. A little bit. But yeah, he's like, well, I was just told to come here. And this guy saw you in the Abbey where, you served years ago. Do you remember, a man who asked you about heavenly bodies? And here's the thing. Badeni's like, yeah, I was forced to go talk to people. So no, I don't remember any of it. I was always bored to tears. And Akshi's like, oh, okay. That's really sad because Gross was, what's so interesting about this scene is that Gross was so moved by Badeni's speech to him. It changed his life. It changed the reflection that he had, the outcome that it had. And Badeni not only does Badeni not remember that conversation ever happening, which is really sad in Gross's case, not only does he not remember it, he did not give two shits about being in that town. And he did not think that he was influencing anybody, to say the least. So the fact that you find out that not only did you influence somebody, but that influence has come completely full circle and is now potentially changing your life and you don't even know it, is unreal. It's crazy. But yeah, she's like, okay. He's like, he kept these records and of course, that's when he gets I like that he has the monocle so he can see the observation of Mars. I love that he has it, which again is kind of a handicap that he has because his eyesight has been fairly ruined. They're fairly thorough. I guess even some lay people. And then he's like, well, why has he got this retrograde? What's with it? It occurs every 2 years. It's an important phenomenon. And then Akshi's like, well, he kind of gave up. He felt betrayed by the retrograde thing. He's like, betrayed? And here's the thing. Akshi's not very good at explaining because, we as the audience know that it wasn't just that he felt betrayed by the retrograde incident. It was that it tied into his concept of having hope in the world after a near suicide attempt and losing his family. So there's a whole context that Akshi's not even mentioning to Badeni. Badeni would have no idea. And so Badeni's just like, why would he just give up? It's so fascinating in this moment to think about how context is so important. And the fact that Akshi isn't able to give the full context changes the meaning. It changes how we interact with it. And it's something you can relate to now. If you don't have the full context, you may think a certain way about a story, but then once you find out the whole context, then you're like, oh, well, that changes everything. So it's fascinating to watch. I also want to take this time to point out that by now you probably have all commented on who the voice actor for Badeni is. I forgot to look it up last episode because I was really excited. Badeni's voice actor is a voice actor that once I know who it is, I'm like, oh, yeah, heard that voice everywhere. But I always mix it up with someone else. Always. I never get this voice actor correct on the first go. So I went and I was like, who's Badeni's Japanese voice actor? It is Yuichi Nakamura. If you don't know who Yuichi Nakamura is, he's been in a couple shows on my channel. He's been Cyan in Frieren. He's also been, I don't know, Satoru Gojo in Jujutsu Kaisen, Kuro in Haikyuu. Like, he's been a lot of actors. Gojo is probably the one, that comes up in this, but he's also been in Blue Lock. He's also been in Spy Family. He's been in a lot of things. So I was like, oh, that's so cool. He's had a lot of things to do. And in ORB, he is Badeni. I think that fits so well because Badeni has this arrogance and ego to him that when I think of a character that Nakamura has played, Nakamura has like an ego and an arrogance to the voices that he does that you're just like, okay, yeah, no, that character checks out. He's very good at it. He's very good at a charmingly arrogant character. Although Badeni's not really charming. Raffle was a little bean. He was a charming little bean. Badeni's not very charming, which we're going to talk about a little bit more with his character. He's like, he didn't know the planets move in reverse. But the thing is that everything we find out by the end of this episode changes everything. And then he kind of schools Oczy being like, well, the word planet, as you know, of course, comes from planetus, which is the Greek word for wanderer. I like he's using the hourglass. Okay, what's kind of cool here is we get to see his vision where he can't see Oczy very well and he has to use a little glass to see him. That's freaking cool. I love that. And you notice when he puts it in front of him and kind of swirls it around, it makes his vision a little bit better. That's interesting. Neat. Someone who knew so little. What was he doing this for? What purpose? And Akshi's like, I don't know. That is one aspect about Badeni's character that's kind of, it's interesting to see the spectrum of intelligence in this series and how it leads people. Because Hubert, I feel like Hubert's character would have embraced Gross and would have been like, oh, you don't know a lot now, but you'll learn more as you get into it and just keep studying the stars. You'll learn more. Like Hubert was a very encouraging mentor to Raffle. And I think he would have been that way towards Gross if Gross had been able to encounter him. Badeni is not Hubert, nor is he Raffle. Although I have theories about him and Raffle. We'll get into this later. But Badeni is like, I'm intelligent. Oh, you're not on my level? Okay, peasant, I guess. But he very much is not an encourager of learning. He's just like, well, you do the research yourself. Figure it out. Hubert was a teacher. Badeni is not a teacher. Badeni is a researcher. And I think that it's interesting to see those two because Hubert was a researcher as well, but Hubert was a really good teacher, right? And Raffle was on his way to being, here's my thing. What I was going to talk about is I feel like there's a part of Badeni that would have been Raffle if Raffle had been able to go to the university and just did a free-for-all with the research on heliocentrism. I think that there's an arrogance there that I think Raffle also had as a character, and had he been able to tap into it unfiltered and without restriction, I think he would have been kind of like Badeni. However, I think Raffle also had this kind of saintliness to him when it came down to the wire that I don't know if Badeni has. And there's a masochism to Badeni that I don't think Raffle had as well. So if Raffle had chosen the torture instead of poisoning himself, that would have been the Badeni route. But he did not. And Badeni's like, I'll just punish myself rather than the poison. So it's like, okay. It's just neat to see the different, it's interesting to see the different types of intelligence on screen here. And then you have Akshay. But Akshay will get there, right? He's like, I got my hopes up for nothing. Why am I here? So then we got the intro. We're going to skip the intro. And we went into the episode's called Move the World. So we went back in time to Badeni at this monastery where apparently because we can't have anything else fashionable, we're just going to alter our hair. Man, these haircuts. I want to know why the monk hairdo. Why do monks have weird haircuts? Okay. Oh, wow. So there are some, interesting. Okay. Why do monks have this iconic hair? Okay. It's called tonsure. All right. We're going to get into this. Tonsure is the practice of cutting or shaving some or all the hair on the scalp as a sign of religious devotion or humility. It originated from the Latin word tonsura, meaning clipping or shearing, and referred to a specific practice in medieval Catholicism abandoned by the papal order in 1972? This was going on until 1972? Well, everybody was growing their hair out in the 70s, so obviously. I'm joking. That's not that long ago. That's not that long ago, actually. That's like, I mean, that's, 60 years ago. That's not that long ago, honestly, in the grand scheme of things. Tonsure, in its earliest Greek and Roman origin, was used as a sign or signifier for slavery. That's so fascinating, because that's talking about how slavery, that servitude, gets reimagined and reintegrated and evolved into devotion by the monks. That's fascinating. And tonsure can also refer to a secular practice of shaving all or part of the scalp to show support or sympathy, or to designate mourning. Current usage more generally refers to cutting or shaving for monks, devotees, or mystics of any religion as a symbol of their renunciation of the worldly fashion and esteem. It is still a traditional practice in Catholicism by specific religious orders with papal permission. It is also commonly used in Eastern Orthodox churches for newly baptized members, frequently for Buddhist novices, monks, and nuns. The complete shaving of one's head bald, or just shortening the hair, exists as a traditional practice in Islam after completion of the Hajj, and is practiced by a number of Hindu religious orders. Interesting. Well, I like that they had all the different designs and that we're seeing some of them. There's some images here I'm seeing of like different, the different images of the shaved head. Some of them are from the episode itself, so that's kind of cool. Interesting. Things were learned today. That's fun. So anyway, so Badeni wants to go to this abbey to go and research more. And I love Badeni's character backstory. I absolutely love it. He's like, only those recommended by 2 or 3 or more elite universities can enter this abbey. Badeni just wants to learn as much as he can in this world. And it's sort of interesting because, kind of like Nowak, Badeni has discovered that there's a way to play the system to your advantage. Whereas you had Nowak, again, I could go get Whiteboard Coon, but we're too far in the conversation now. It'll probably come back next episode, don't worry. But Nowak, as we've talked about in previous episodes, was using the kind of protection of the church and its ideology as a way for him to still, I mean, it's kind of, he's a veteran mercenary. And if you know anyone that is a veteran in times of war, reintegrating into society is not always easy, and especially back in medieval times. So Nowak was like, oh, you mean I can be a member of the church and hurt people like I was doing as a mercenary, but get church protection for my kid from it? Okay, sign me up. That's literally what he's doing. Badeni is like, oh, you mean I can be in this church and study theology while gaining all the knowledge and access to all of the resources that the plebeian peasants don't get access to? Sign me up. So it's kind of the same deal, only they're each taking advantage of the religious system in a different way, right? In a different way. And this monk, this clergyman that's kind of over this stack of papers, kind of seems to know about that. He's like, yes, everyone here has been chosen to do God's work. And Badeni's like, yeah, just get me in the abbey. And he's like, I say this with that in mind. Your work is overwhelming. Like, his stack of papers is so much more than everyone else. Where others work in teams of 10, you have solved all these problems on your own. And it's such an interesting contradiction because Badeni just has a thirst for knowledge. Badeni seems like a prodigy. He seems like he's just a savant. He wants to know all the things and he wants all the knowledge. And he's like, well, let me research and keep learning as much as I can. And he's just so much more intelligent than everyone. But that's a threat to the church. If you know too much, you may spill the beans to the laymen in the world and reveal that we're not what we're trying to present ourselves as, and you're smart enough to do it, and that scares us. That when you have high intelligence, it scares people, especially people in power. And that's kind of where they're coming at it. And he's like, yes, however, you must also understand what this means. So one thing that is insane about Badeni's character is I had assumed that he had gotten those scars from a mercenary, from somebody like Nowak, from like before he went into the church, he was like a rogue bandit or something or whatever. They're self-inflicted. He's been hurting himself to be able to gain knowledge. And does it to be like, okay, I hurt myself. Now can I read the book? Like that is wild. And I did not see that coming. And that makes like his character 1,000 times more cool in my mind, because he knows how to play the system. He's like, I'm strong. I can handle it. I gave myself 10 extra lashings. Now let me read the material and keep my research up. And the church, who has, in this instance, created a foundation that punishes, but in a weird way kind of rewards through punishment, he's figured that out and is taking advantage of the system. Which is kind of similar to what Hubert did. Hubert's like, fine, I gotta be tortured so I can keep studying heliocentrism. Okay. It's wild. You have to keep in step with others and observe the rules. And then, of course, Badeni's like, well, I don't want to cooperate with lesser people. People of lesser ability. I don't think that Raffle would be as arrogant as Badeni, but I think that Raffle would be as smart as Badeni. And it's interesting to see Badeni's personality and attitude towards science and towards research, and just doesn't give a shit about anybody else. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. Whereas you have Akshi, who's a perfect foil to that. Akshi cares too much about everybody else. And so it's like, how are these two fish out of water individuals going to learn more about each other in this buddy comedy orb on the movements of the earth? We'll find out. And so, yeah. But also, I was getting a little bit of Adam vibes from Skate the Infinity from Badeni. Not complaining about that, because I like that character a lot. But he's just, yeah, he just gives himself all those lashes. And he's like, well, I never asked for that. And he's like, well, let me speak now. It's kind of like, I punished myself, now let me talk. Wild. He's like, you're our most learned monk, but you're utterly lacking in prudence. Our vocabulary word of the day is prudence, which is the quality of being cautious, or of exercise, of to exercise good judgment, act with caution, and be sensible. Yeah. Now, the biblical definition of prudence is being careful about your choices and thinking before acting. Here's the thing. I believe that Badeni has thought before he acted. He just, one, does not care, and two, believes that he is the smartest person in the room and is above the rules. He's like, oh, I'll just play these rules to my advantage. It's fine. Like, honestly, I mean, it would kind of be like, I had a student in one of my classes last year that as I was talking, they were typing on their laptop, which, whatever, you can take notes in the class, it's fine. But then halfway through the lecture, they stopped and they're like, what does this word mean? And I was like, that's a weird question to ask. And then I realized they were taking the quiz for the chapter during my lecture, and as I was giving the answers to the quiz, they were taking the quiz. Which, you know what? Game recognized game. You want to do that? Do it. That's smart. But that's not being, that's not a lack of prudence. That's, the rules, you're using them to your advantage. That's not thinking before acting. That's actually thinking quite a lot and then acting and figuring things out. And the church with Badeni is just, they're prefacing it and calling it a lack of prudence. But the reality is Badeni has realized what the system is and is playing the system. And that's not a lack of prudence. That's just him kind of outwitting you. I mean, it's masochistic and you're hurting yourself, but I wouldn't call it a lack of prudence. And he's like, with a soft stance, you'll be swallowed by the times. If you rely on prudence alone, you'll never grasp it. what I've been waiting for, the moment I become special and the moment I change history. This is what's interesting, is that Raffle at the beginning of the story was not wanting to change history. He was just wanting to get by and life be easy, right? You know what? I say all this. Him and Badeni are not similar. It's fun to talk about these characters and break them down and realize that about them. But Raffle was like kind of wanting life to be easy and for him to be able to just research and study science. But Raffle was never out to make himself be famous. The fact that he left him and Hubert's documents to the next generation without referencing themselves so that they would be known is indicative of that. Do I think Badeni is going to put his name all over these notes if he leaves recalculated versions? He probably will. He'd be like, this is Badeni's theorem. He might. He seems that way. But maybe he won't. Maybe he will be like Raffle in the sense of changing the world without drawing attention to himself. Who knows? Who even knows at this point? But yeah, and of course, he's like, you have such an arrogant attitude. Yep. You have such an arrogant attitude. Save that passion for studying theology. And he's like, what use could you have for algebra and geometry? And he's like, I'm going to use them to solve God's greatest riddles. Now, the one priest says all of the answers are in the Holy Scripture. And he's like, well, then why do the stars move? Nobody tells us that. I did love this part here where he says, when he started talking about the world and he was saying God created two worlds. This imperfect land below the moon's plane. It's subject to cycles of creation and destruction. I kind of love that when he was talking about the cycles of creation and destruction, it made me think of like the tides and the moon. But this is such a weird thing. When he said two worlds, it kind of made me think of two sexes in a way, because you have male and female. And we were talking about this, some friends and I were, that originally everyone at conception starts out as female. Everyone does. It's only at a certain point of your development as a little zygote that you transition from being female to male. And so that's interesting, which that in itself contradicts a lot of text that talk about men being first. And it's like, funny that your old chicken and the egg thing. But I thought of the two sexes because when we said, one world is below the moon, it's subject to cycles of creation and destruction. It made me think of, menstrual cycles in women, the idea of your body shedding an entire layer of itself and recreating it, and just like those bodies doing that. I was like, and it being tied to creation, but also destroying. And I was like, that's so fascinating. That's so fascinating, right? But, yet the heavens above the moon's plane are eternal, with no beginning and no end, and they should move in a perfect circle. And that I would understand, but reality is different. Within the heavens God created, and we see the whole retrograde there, the circles devolve into peculiar rings with retrograde movements. So I wanted to stop real quick and talk about that, because somebody in the Discord pointed out for episode 4, they showed an image of the one for Mars, which looks very similar to like Raffles drawings and things like that. And Luminist is the one in the Discord that said, I'm going to say this verbatim, you talked in the discussion for episode 4 that if Gross had just waited for some time, the Mars orbit would have connected back after completing retrograde. But actually, from my understanding, in geocentrism, the trajectories of the planets don't connect after making a revolution. It's actually very ugly and annoying, and that's why Raffle and Hubert were complaining about it in episode 1. And in this image below, you can see how the retrograde movements are not symmetrical and just all over the place. And we joked that Death the Kid and Soul Eater would be having an aneurysm while watching these. But they also posted this picture of, which I'll show you all here, of all of these other planets and what their like retrogrades look like. It's kind of cool. It looks like one of the little toys where you had the cylinder on it and you just drew the circles around it and made it like a pattern. So even though Mars is not necessarily symmetrical, I kind of love it. I love Venus's looking like the flower, Mercury looking like the perfect little donut, Jupiter's looking like this flower, and then Saturn and Uranus looking like theirs actually looks more symmetrical than anything, which is kind of crazy. But I love these. I think they're so neat. And they're just beautiful patterns in the world that are there for us to witness. Isn't that awesome? So yeah, humankind must confront, otherwise it means God's design was flawed. Badeni's approach is genius here, and the monk is just sitting there like, son of a bitch, because Badeni is saying, if you all keep keeping us from researching and finding out these mysteries and unlocking the secrets of them, well then what about these imperfections that exist that people are looking at all the time? He's like, does that mean God is flawed? If we can't provide an answer, then how are we going to defend our deity against people that would say otherwise? Genius. Love it. Love it. And of course, the monk who is like, I don't want to talk about that. He's like, well, that cannot be. He's like, and that means that there must be a reason that humankind has yet to discover. But the powers that be wouldn't want you thinking that, even though Badeni's like, but if we believe in God, we have to look at this. And the monk says, well, there is no reason. It's simply as God ordained. Humankind will never learn more about the heavens than we know now. And then at this point, he says there, heaven and earth are in different classes. Can a pauper know the mind of a noble? That's it. That's it right there. That's the power structure, is the illusion of we're akinning heaven and earth to a class system. We're akinning it to like, you are on the earth, you are the peasants, you will never get to the level of the heavens, which is the level of a nobleman, unless you do X, Y, and Z. And you will only get to the heavens when you die. That is the insaneness of it. Badeni is saying, very much like Hubert did, the world is what God has given us. Its beauty is for us to behold. Its mysteries are for us to unlock. That's the point of humankind. But the church has twisted it to become, no, this is a power structure, and unless you were born in or have been selected and chosen to be within the heavens, you cannot be there. You are stuck here. And if you try to go against the will of those in those positions, you will not only never get there, but you will go somewhere worse. Which is not necessarily true. I'm very much a Christian. That is my faith. I do believe in God and in a higher power, but I very much am aware of the history and the systems that have been put in place. And they've changed. I'm not Catholic, so I don't know a lot about Catholicism and how much it's evolved over time, if to what level. But it is fascinating to look at the church in this perspective. But also, if you think about it, there are a lot of those same power structures in place in religion now. There's a lot that are still in place, and they're not necessarily, they coat it with a shinier veneer. They may not be as barbaric in sounding as it's played up here, but they're not far off. So that's interesting. That's interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess the closest symbolism I could think of is, for example, before I sat down to record this, I do a class one night a week with high school students where we go volunteer at different places, right? And the place we volunteered tonight was a soup kitchen, and we made cookies to give out to families that were in need. So these families that were in need came to this location. They were given bags of groceries, which is an insane donation. It's so good. Like these kids, they had kids with them. They were starving. And I was like, what is this? And it's so sad to see there are families struggling that much in where I live. And a lot of times it's glossed over and it's made invisible, but this was like right in your face. And so my likeness would be when someone who is a member of a church and wears these fancy clothes and is very like has a lot of materialism, but then they talk down onto somebody that has to go get a free grocery every week. And it's like, I think you're missing the point. It's like, I'm not going to get my soapbox too much, but that line there, can a pauper know the mind of a noble? I was like, that explains it right there. That's it. That's in a nutshell. That's everything you need to know. It would be a freak occurrence at best. Oh. But Badeni is not, no. He's like, well, if you, I like that Badeni hears all of that and he's like, he's like, yeah, that's cool and all. Can I look at your forbidden text? And then he's like, no. But that's, again, he's like, why keep the forbidden texts unless you just want it for yourself? Why is it restricted by mere humans? I love that. I love that Badeni's like, you're not a god. Why do you get judgment over it? Oh, Badeni, I love it. But he's like, well, if you do it again, you're going to lose your eyes. So he's like, why is it just me? I've acquired all there is to gain here. How careless of me left. I feel like I don't feel like the window was left open as a trap now that we've seen the whole scene. I do think it was a coincidence, but I like that Badeni throws it back onto the monk about the abbot calling him imprudent. And he's like, well, who's calling me imprudent? You're the one left the window open. And then he saw the book. Again, he has that curiosity that's like Raffles. And I just, what Badeni gives me the vibes of? When they came in there and they were like, if you open that book, I've not seen you read it, but if you open that book, we're gonna burn your eyes. And he's like, don't do it. It gave me the vibe of a cat on a table and there's a glass of water on the edge of the table. And they're like, if you do anything with that water, and the cat goes, the cat just knocks the water glass out like, ha, like just F you. Like that's just that was the vibe. That was the vibe Badeni gave me. I loved it. I was like, yes. He's like, I have to look. I want to make the thumbnail him reading the book. Like, I know it might be a little bit of a spoiler since he has both of his eyes in that scene, but that red, that just, a lot of the thumbnails for this series have been blue, like Starlight, but not today. Today we're going all red, which again, it's like Hellfire-esque, but he was like, I'm going to look and see what I can in this moment. Which, you know what? He's able to still see somewhat as long as he has the magnifying glass. So, I mean, it's fine. Although, damn, I like that Badeni does say he's kind of prophetic in this sense where he's like, look, if you all don't change something, then the church is going to feel outdated and the rest of the world's going to leave you behind. Badeni gets to a really good point. And this goes back to what Moomin said that I noted at the start of this episode in the intro. You can't kill an idea. As long as humanity is around, I'll always quote Attack on Titan, as long as there's at least two people, you're always going to have conflict. But as long as there is humanity, there is always going to be curiosity and imagination and that thirst for knowledge. And you cannot drown it out. It will always be there. You can try, and people have tried, and you may succeed in some realms, but it's always going to be there. Always. So it just, I love that Badeni's like, you can, the church, I'll take you down with me. I hated that they did the stuff of the wax over the eye. And then him saying it as he says, God bless you. He blinds this man. And as he blinds him, he's like, okay, God bless you. I'm like, well, if that's not the hypocrisy, I don't know what is. And then we cut to him as Akshi's leaving saying, show me the documents. And Akshi's like, okay, sir. He's like, start by observing Mars tonight. And it didn't hit me until he got outside that I was like, oh, he wants him to look up at the sky. He's like, I have no time for jokes. It's like, no, he actually has a lot of trauma. But Badeni doesn't care about your trauma. He's like, actually has a lot of trauma. I just want to make this clear. And then, oh God, Akshi is going to give it up. He's like, why do I have to do this in the first place? He was going to give it up. And he's like, there's no reason why I should have to do this. And honestly, Akshi's not wrong. By all accounts, he could drop everything, go into town, start from square one, and never talk to Badeni again. But Akshi's too nice, and he's too kind-hearted, and he knows how much this meant to Gross, and he did promise him that he would. And Akshi's not gonna not keep his promises. He's just that nice of a guy, right? And then for a second, again, I thought he was gonna throw away that necklace, and I was like, don't you freaking dare. Not Raffle and Hubert's necklace. You can drop the little abacus thing, you can drop the book, but not that necklace. And he's like, on the other hand, those were the only two people I ever met who not only died feeling satisfied, but they valued this world more than the heavens. He's like, well, they surely went to hell, but did they? You know? But then, I love these, like, you know, they were the only ones that I met that were satisfied with death, and they were also the only two people that were really nice to me. I love when he looks up at the stars. I love when he looks up at it, and his eyes are so blue in that moment. And when he first looks up, you know, I like that when he first looks up, all the eyes are looking at him because he places hope in the world and chooses to do it. He says he can't, but then he does. And all the eyeballs looking at him is so creepy. It's so creepy. But then after talk with Badeni, he can look up at the stars and he doesn't see the eyeballs anymore, which we'll get to that scene. He looks so miserable, though, when he comes back down, and Badeni's like, all right, show me the stash of books. And I thought it was so interesting that he, like, sees the stack of books, and then we get our end card, which we got our end card at, what was it, 17 minutes into the episode, we got the mid-range end card, and I was like, what? I was floored. But yep, there's the box. And then he starts to puke, which he puked in the OP. So now we know he's like, what does he say there? He said, like, why are you vomiting? He's like, are you okay? And he says there, he goes, oh, I'm sorry. I'm fine. He says, I merely vomited years of pitiful common sense and preconceptions. This diva, this absolute diva. Because he's like, I have found in this box something that's going to change the universe. The church could definitely be a problem, but publishing isn't out of the question. Like, he's already thinking ahead. He's like, the church might get in my way, but I could publish it. We could get it out there. My dude. And he's like, well, what does it even say? He's like, oh, I'll summarize. As he summarizes, he goes in this big, long spiel that Akshi's like, I don't even understand. Now, Akshi, I am a little bit worried if Akshi figures out the gravity of this situation. If Akshay figures out just exactly what these documents could do, would he be convinced by Nowak or someone else to destroy the documents before Badeni can do anything with them? Potentially. I could see him doing it, but I guess it depends on how far he gets. So yeah, no, Badeni says this is going to fill in the holes with Aristotle's concentric sphere theory and Ptolemy's eccentric circles and distribute the lack of equilibrium between the cosmos and its individual points, as well as the divergent calculations currently central to all theories. All those issues can be traced to the substantial number of unpredictable movements among the heavenly bodies, but it explains those problems with a simple theory of motion. To summarize even further, the earth is moving. I love it. I love it. I love it. You could use the thumbnail of Badeni in the white light, but I really like the red one better. And Akshi's just like, it's not moving at all. Akshi's like, what? Bitch, no. I love it. And so what I like is that Badeni is like, look, these ideas that are written here are far too rational. I like Badeni's like, they need a little spark of madness, which I could get them in my own calculations. I also like that Badeni, for someone that's not a very good teacher, realizes that Akshi is a kinesthetic learner, and Akshi learns better by example and by demonstration. So he does the experiment where he's like, we're going to draw like all what you think the planets and how they move works. And so then they talk about retrograde again. And he's like, they talk about how, you know, the planets are always moving forward even while they seem to move backwards. So he takes the stick And he says, if the earth was still, this would make sense, but it is possible. So he says, he starts walking around the stick, right? And says, I want you to come along as I get closer to the circle, come around and pass me. I love it. He's like, I just found the secret to overturning 1,000 years of Ptolemaic theory. Because he basically points out that the planets are always moving. It just depends on how fast we're moving past them. And I thought back to astronomy when I was in grade school, that we talked about how the planets rotated around the sun at different speeds. And the Earth takes 24 hours to rotate in itself. It itself rotates within 24 hours, which is why we have a day, right? And then we have a year and how long it takes it to orbit around the sun. So you have 1 day's rotation and then a year's rotation, right? But the thing about it is, it's kind of crazy, is every planet has a different speed of their own personal rotation and their rotation around the sun. So their days and years are different times than the Earth's. And I love that Badeni kind of like has this moment of explaining that to Oczy by having him go at a different speed than him around the same stick. And that's all it took. And there's chances that other people have thought up this theory as well, but it's like, to be able to explain it and put it into words is amazing. I love how he explains this to him. If there is really no retrograde motion, it's because we're seeing things. The planetary motions would look like this. Do you understand what this means? The stone chest is calling out to humanity. I'm like, oh, I love it. He's like, yes, it's calling out to humanity. It's asking us, the heavens are sublime and solemn, but they are in harmony with the earth. And that's not what the church wants you to know. The church doesn't want you to realize that the earth and heavens are in the same realm. No, we can't have that, because then you might start thinking that the heavens don't have as much power as the rest of the earth. And if you're going by a power structure, you can't have the analogy work for you in a power structure if the peasants realize they have just as much power as you do. It's just asserting it. Love it. And Oczy has this like just life-changing moment. Are you saying the heavens are as corrupt as our world? Which, to be fair to Oczy, is a terrifying concept, that you've believed your entire existence that you're going to this place that is a better place than the corrupt world you've been raised to believe. But Badeni has a Hubert moment where he's like, no. He's like, I don't think that they're necessarily as corrupt. It could be perhaps the world we live in is not the ugly bottom of the universe, but instead, it's always been part of the beauty that is up there. That's what I believe, which is kind of what Hubert believes too. He's like, but that would mean heaven and earth are one. Could it be? And when he looks up, that's when he sees the stars, and they're just stars. Oh, this show is so good. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. Yes. Oczy has this moment with Badeni to really, he's like, do you feel God's grace? I love that. I love that Badeni is religious. He is religious. He just is intelligent and is like, can't you feel it? Like, we are a part of this world created by God, and it's beautiful. And you can feel its serenity. This sky is offering me a great reward. And he's like, well, yeah, but something about it seems more beautiful than ever. It's that moment of understanding and knowledge, and that aha moment that's just so fantastic. I love it. And Badeni gave me a little smile like, oh, I guess the moon is beautiful tonight, isn't it? Look, a girl has to ship somehow, and I'm here for it. And then, but what does he say here? He says there's only one way to make something absolute. We have to move the world. So I'm like, I have a feeling that Badeni is going to be like, look, we got to publish this shit. We got to get this stuff wrote down. We got to make sure people know about this. We have to create a movement. And not just a literal movement, but also a figurative one as well. Cheers. Cheers, Orb. Freaking cheers, Orb. This episode was fantastic. And no one died! I was like, oh man, when I started episode 4, I fully expect Akshay to die by episode 6. I'm so glad I've been proven wrong. We had to sacrifice Gross to get there, but it's fine. No, based on the ED, I definitely think that Badeni and Akshay have more to do, and I think that girl is going to get involved with the 3 of them. Now, once that happens, it's anybody's game. We're only on episode 6, and this season has at least 25 episodes to it, so we are a long way away from knowing what this is going to happen and what's going to go out, but I love Badeni. I love his character. Love his character so much. I like him and Akshay together. I feel like Gross had the starts to make Akshay think about things, but Badeni has the intelligence and the capability to follow through, which I think is fascinating. And who knows? Badeni might learn something from Akshay. We'll have to see. But I cannot wait to hear your thoughts down below about this episode. This episode was so freaking good. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Anyway, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more Orb on the movements of the Earth. Bye.